All right, this is Davis, and he will play the fourth movement from Mendelssohn's Fourth Organ Sonata. Good for you. It's really very well played. There were some great moments. So for me as a listener, that gets me really excited about the piece. There's certainly things that we could talk about and work on, but I will say that you had moments, really, particularly in here. This was sort of the first time that I sensed that you sort of relaxed. Maybe with the recording, you're a little cautious, or you sounded a little cautious for a couple of pages, and then finally here it was you were relaxing a little, and it was getting more interesting, for the listener. there was some slight flexibility to it. Maybe it's because you've written drama here, and you have drama written on the page there. And here, you know, that came out very well. I believe, though, that once you've done that, when you have subsequent re-entries of the subject, it needs to move. It sounds as though you take the time here, and then you sort of spin the entire page at a slightly slower tempo. The energy really wanes, and then you have this entry in the pedal, and it's come back a bit. I don't think you can wait that long. I think it's okay to have the time here because you move towards this high point in the phrase. The subject goes up to this high A. You have the A pedal point, and that makes sense there. But then after that, it needs to get, and particularly with this entry, it needs to get back to whatever your tempo was for the fugue. I think that's something, just in general, we can talk about tempo. I think we could talk a little bit about the way that you're using the instrument, the sound that you're producing on the instrument. Let's just consider the piece. You know, you can really think of this as sort of a prelude or introduction, if you will, to a fugue. It's in a way very much like Bach in his approach, or even the North German composers like Buxtehude, who would have influenced, of course, the young Bach. And you see that in some of Bach's early works, that we have prelude or toccata-like material in the opening of a piece, a fugal section, sometimes even a completely worked out fugue, but then at the end, whatever material was at the beginning prior to the fugue, it returns. And Mendelssohn, in many ways has done that sort of thing with this piece. He clearly was influenced by Bach. He studied the organ at a young age, so we knew he could play Bach. Very important that he could play the pedals, he could use his feet. And even though he spent his life really as a great composer, pianist, conductor, and so forth, I think he did love the organ and enjoy the opportunities whenever they arose, to play the organ. There weren't many chances for him to do that. He didn't have access to instruments very often, and it's funny if you read some of his letters. He talks about the time when he was preparing the famous Bach recital at St. Thomas in Leipzig, when they wanted to raise the funds for the Bach monument. There, he was just spending hours sweating and working towards this recital, and but that's not something that he really did very often. But that influence is clearly important. With that in mind, I think we can think about playing Mendelssohn on Baroque organs, and it makes sense. We can think about playing Mendelssohn on organs. A Baroque organ would be in some type of unequal temperament. That has some impact on how we play. That certain harmonies are going to be accentuated. Some harmonies will have more of a pure sound, some will have less of that. So that affects what we do as a performer. So when it comes to timing, let's think about it. Let's just talk about the beginning here. With Mendelssohn, we also have the issue of slurs in these editions. It's a big topic. The editions do not agree often. So you're playing from, I believe, the Novello edition, correct? And one good thing about this is that they give us information about the manuscripts and some of the comparisons with different editions for slurs and so forth. And that's definitely something that we must consider. With this particular piece, it's less of a problem. It's rather problematic with the Allegretto movement prior. But the question is, do the slurs tell us something about articulation? Do they say something about phrasing? What? In this case, I think they are saying something about articulation. However, it seems to me that perhaps you're doing a little too much. A subtle break would be enough. The pedal can remain legato, but a subtle articulation here in the manuals makes sense. So we're just going to start it and think about that. I think if you just have less space here, that will help. But at the same time, you need to play it as though you know, and you want to tell the listener that this is the downbeat. This is the beginning, really. And these first two chords are upbeat. So it's 3, 4, 1, and that's where your accent is. Before you begin, hear beats 1 and 2. Hear it in your ear. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you'll play 3, 4 as upbeats, and then this is your strong beat. Okay? So we're going to try a little bit less space here, and also whenever you have quicker values, the 16ths here, play them more as you might for Baroque music, which means you're going to give them very little emphasis. You know, they are unimportant notes, and you need to move to the next strong beat. Okay? Try it. Harmony, the 6/4 emphasis, I thought that was quite good. The one thing I didn't say is that you could play this more in 2. And I think you could, before, when you first played it, you were giving a little bit too much emphasis on every single beat. I think it would help to think more by the half note. And there seems to be a slight delay here. Don't slow down at all. It's dum bum ba dee bum ba da dee da da. So keep that moving once you begin. Okay, try it once again. So think in 2. Keep it going. Much better. There are moments when perhaps you could take a little bit more time for this B flat. You do it at the end of the piece. You could have just a little bit more emphasis on that. And then the same thing with this, the way that this motive is imitated, this da dee da dee ba da da dee. Each time happens several times, and you could just perhaps make these rests slightly longer each time, to the point where here you take the most amount of time. Just a tiny bit more might be sort of interesting. You want to try that? Let's go back to here and get into that. Sorry, let's try. Yeah, try it. Okay. I would say that in general with something like this, you don't want to lose sight of what the harmonic scheme is. And in a sense, much like Baroque music, you have to sort of think from the bottom up. You know, you think of what the harmony is, you hear those chords in your ear, and then, you know, so the pedal is crucial, that the strength of the rhythm coming from the pedal is what you react to. And so these really need to land pretty much on time, and it's just the subtlety of these 8 notes with what we just did. So that's something you can continue to experiment with and consider. think the next thing for us to talk about is this fugue subject. You know, it's very Baroque in the way that it's written. And I think that much like a Baroque subject such as this, we have a compound melody. And you need to think of how to bring this upper voice out. This is... So we hear... And then we have that, the distinctive rhythmic pattern that's set up here. The issue is with the sound of the organ. I think you're releasing this E natural slightly too early. So the pipes are not sounding completely. So let's just try that. So the issue of the compound melody, bringing out this upper voice, and then making sure that these notes, this dotted eighth, is not too short. Okay? Try it. Would you do this though? Try it without the manuals, just pedal alone. Yeah, I think that's good. Just don't linger. You linger slightly on the... It's got to be ba-da-da-dee. So if anything, you could be slightly late starting it, you know, but that rest has to be alive. Ba-da-da-dee-da-da-dum-bum-ba. Okay, try it once again. Just the pedal, and then manuals can come in with the next voice. And then this is the moment when, you know, you did something really very interesting. I think, by the way, that you could continue to think of this in two, just as we did with the introductory section. And I think it would help give it more forward motion, and also even help with bringing out this compound melody. So that's just something to think about. With that in mind, could we pick it up from perhaps here, or we'll get this entry, and then we'll go on a little bit with this page. Okay? Much better. I think you can acknowledge the pedal point, give it the dramatic effect that you want, but at the same time, it has to drive forward. You know, I think it's taking away from the excitement of the piece if you do otherwise. Yeah, this is Davis. This is coming along very, very well. And then we might just consider, just to conclude the ending, you'll keep, that energy going, and then maybe we could get into it from here, and then
Sure.
just get into the closing measures. Somehow I felt that, yeah, sure, you need some retard, but I think this was almost too much, particularly for that eighth note. For this chord, as we suggested at the beginning, it's absolutely fine to give some emphasis to that, but not perhaps too much. All right, so let's get into that maybe from there. Excellent, and I think one thing that I sensed you doing, I'm not sure if you were, but to create just the right amount of retard, if you begin to count or hear in your ear the eighth notes gradually slowing down, that helps you in preparing for this. So counting those inner beats is very, very helpful. I was just going to say, I mentioned earlier the sound of the instrument. Here, the texture is the thickest it is in the entire piece, and make sure that you don't release the chords too quickly, because otherwise the instrument doesn't sound at its best. But at any rate, wonderful performance. Thank you so much. A delight to hear.